Good afternoon. My name is Ben Roll. I'm an application engineer with Ally PLM Solutions. I want to welcome all of you to our Lunch Bytes series. Today's topic is on the variable table and how to link it to Excel. For those of you that don't know, we hold these Lunch Bytes sessions once a month to look at the capabilities of Solid Edge that are often overlooked and maybe some of you don't know about. You'll be on listen-only mode today. That way there's no feedback from speakerphones. If you have any questions, please feel free to write them down and send them to us in an email, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. So like I mentioned, today we're going to look at the variable table. Few things that we're going to cover today. We're going to look at how to drive values through the variable table, how to create and rename variables, how to use formulas, how to look at the filters, use the variable rule editor. We're also going to look at how to control patterns through the variable table, how to link the variable table to Excel and drive the 3D model from Excel. We're also going to look at how to suppress variables through the variable table, how to expose those variables so that you can use them in a draft, and we're also going to look at the pure variables tool. So some of you might be wondering, why would we want to use the variable table? Why would we want to link it to Excel? Well, there's a few reasons. The variable table allows you to define and edit functional relationships between variables and dimensions. It allows you to take advantage of parametric modeling. It also allows others who are maybe not Solid Edge users to make changes to the model, so they don't have to know how the model was created in order to make changes. It will also allow you to make different configurations of the model, so we'll show how you can do that. We'll go ahead and look at Solid Edge. You'll see right now I have this part open. I have a few dimensions on there. So what we're going to do is go into the variable table. Just move this around so that we can see all of them at once. So to get to the variable table, you just go to Tools and then come in here to Variables. Move this over. And now you'll see we have the variable table up. So the first thing we're going to look at is, what are all these buttons on here? How do you read the variable table? So the first thing you'll see up here is this drop down. If I click on that, you'll see there's all these different units of measurement. So this is your unit type. You'll notice over here in the value it has the units next to the variable. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable, and I'll go ahead and change this from distance to something like temperature. Since it's on temperature, when I come in here and create a new variable, then notice a new thing with ST4 is that this variable table edits like Excel. So if I hit enter, it moves down. If I hit tab, it moves over. Shift enter moves up. Shift tab moves back. So we'll come in here to this new variable and we'll give it a value. Because it's still on distance, if I come in here and change this to temperature, you'll notice it changes the value there, the unit from millimeters to degrees Celsius. So you have all these different units to pick from, and there's one for scalar. So if you don't want this variable to have a unit, you just want it to be a scalar number, you can select scalar. So you can create these variables and you can use them in formulas to define dimensions or whatever you need to use them for. So the next thing we have over here are the filters. So if I click on this filter button, it brings up the filters. I can filter by type, so I can only show dimensions, user variables, or PMI dimensions. If I go ahead and turn off PMI dimensions, which all these are PMI dimensions, and hit OK, you'll notice Those are now gone, and I'm only left with the physical properties and the new variable that I created. Same thing if I come in here and only turn on user ones, which are variables created by the user, or then that turns off the physical properties because those are automatically created by the system when you create a part. Same thing over here with graphics. You can select either everything in the file or only the stuff that you have selected or the stuff in the window. So we'll go ahead and turn that back to both. That way we have everything showing. Next, we have formula. So there are a few different ways to enter formula. You could enter it here. You click on this, and that brings up the formula function wizard. This have all math trig recently used in Visual Basic. You can create a basic, file through Visual Basic, and you can use that as a function, and it will ask you to browse to that. If you come in here, you select your function that you want, you hit next, and then you type in whatever is required for that function to run. So in this case, for arctangent, it'd be the arctangent of a number, so you either type in a number or a variable that it'll get the number from. Okay. Next, we hit this next button is the variable rule editor. We're not going to go into that right now. You'll see right now it's grayed out. We'll look at that in a little bit. We also have print, which will allow you to print this entire variable table. And of course you have help, which you click on that and it automatically brings up the help for the variables. So now we're going to look at the table itself. So you've got the list of the types, if they're dimensions or variables, the name, the value, the rule, formula, range, whether or not they're exposed, what the exposed name is, and you have a slot to put in comments. So if you come in here and just right click out in space, you can adjust the columns to say, what shows up. You can adjust the width and the alignment. You can also come in here and adjust the font to make it easier to read and to adjust it for when you print it. So you can select whatever font you want. Okay, so that's how the table's laid out. You'll notice over here that there are these lock buttons next to these dimensions. So with the lock versus unlocked, in order to use a formula, the dimension has to be locked. So we'll go ahead and we'll come in here and we'll lock these two. And now there are a few ways to change the values. Because we're in synchronous, if I just come in here and I double click on the value, you'll notice it brings up the bar that you get whenever you click on a dimension. And now I can change this dimension if I want. I could even lock it if I wanted. So that's how you can drive these dimensions. You can also drive them through a formula, or you can come in here and obviously in the model change the dimension, and that'll change it in the variable table. Now let's say, obviously you're going to have more than just 3 dimensions on your part, usually. So you probably want to name them something meaningful. So there are a few things to keep in mind when you go to rename dimensions or variables. They cannot have any spaces, so that's why you'll notice these have underscores. And the other thing, they're not case sensitive. So let's say for this first one, you'll notice in here it highlights, once you click on a dimension in the variable table, it highlights what that dimension is in the part. That way you can tell where that is so you know what to name it. So this one is the thickness. This one is the height. And this one is the length. So now we want to go in and we want to control that with a formula. So for this, we want the height to always be equal to the length. Now when you type in a formula, you do not have to hit the equal sign. And like I mentioned, it's not case sensitive, so I'm going to go ahead and type in length, all in lowercase. And when I hit enter, see, it capitalizes it because it automatically goes out and finds the length variable. So that's how you drive that with a formula. You can also come in here and using the variable rule editor, if I come in here and click on that, it'll tell me the variable name and the current value. And this is also where you can type in a formula. So you can say the value is based on a formula, and you can type in the formula here as opposed to just typing it into the cell itself. So with the rule editor, you also have a few other options. You can do if it's from pasted length, which we'll show that in a little bit, or you can limit the value to a discrete list or a minimum maximum limit. Or you can have both a formula and a limit on it. So we'll go ahead and leave that at length for now. And we'll come in to this new variable that I created, and we'll go ahead and set that to a discrete list. So for that, you just come in and you separate the values with a semicolon, and then you hit OK. And you'll notice right now this is set to 5, but I did not include 5 in this list. So if I hit OK, it'll tell me that it has been increased to include the current value. And you just hit OK, and you'll see it lists over here what the values are. If I come into the height again, and I say it's based on length, but I also want it to be greater than or equal to 300, and let's say maybe less than 700, and hit OK. You know, so it'll tell me if it's the rule is it's defined by a formula and controlled by a limit. And you'll see over here that it lists what the range is, and the square bracket versus the parenthesis tells you if it's greater than or equal to, or less than or equal to, or just greater than or less than. So what happens, you know, with that limit on there? So let's come into the accuracy. Obviously, the accuracy has to be, you know, less than or equal to 1. So if I come in here and I type 2, you notice it'll yell at me, and I hit OK, and it also highlights that value in orange. That way I know that's out of the range. I have to go in and change that. So I can just change that back to 0.9. The same thing if I come into the height, which is controlled by that formula and the limit, which actually I have to come in to the length for that. If I go and I try and change that to 330, sorry, let me change that to, you'll also notice if I right click, I can get into the variable rule editor too. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to define that min max limit in here. Say greater than or equal to 300. Less than 700. Hit OK. So now when I come in here and I try and make it less than 300, it yells at me because I've defined that in the variable table, and then it'll reset it back to 300. So next we're going to look at patterns. If I come in here and I go ahead and I create a hole on this face, I select my hole that I want, and I can go ahead and position it off of the sides, and we'll say we want it 50 and 50. So I place that hole, and you'll notice in here it updates for these linear values, which I can go in and change, say hole X position and hole Y position. If I come in here, select the hole, and go ahead and pattern that, set that up. I want 3 by 3, and I want the spacing to be 200 total and 200 total. And I've placed that. If I go ahead back into the variable table, you see it says the pattern occurrence count. So that tells me how many in the X and how many in the Y direction. So that's how you can control the number of occurrences of the pattern. So now what we're going to do is link this to Excel. So if I come in here to my Excel document, I'll go ahead and now shrink that down. Let's say we want to control the hole diameter and the pattern in the X direction and pattern in the Y direction. So right now it's 50 for the hole diameter, 3 for the pattern in the X, 3 for the pattern in the Y. All I have to do to link it is come in here and copy from Excel, come back to the variable table, find the variable that I want to link with, say paste link, and you'll see it lists the link here and says the rule is paste link. So I just do that for all 3 of these. Copy that, come into Y count, paste link, and then since for this I'm just going to keep them the same, I can go ahead and use the X occurrence for both Y and X. That way I only have to change one and it'll keep them the same. So now, we'll go ahead and we'll shrink this down, that way you can see the model. Come into my variable table and I save it. I can come in here and change the diameter to say 25 and the occurrence to 6. And you'll notice it automatically updates and changed the size of the hole and the occurrences. So now we'll go ahead and we'll look at this assembly, and you'll notice I have 4 holes in here. Well, let's say we want to suppress those holes for some reason. Come in here and we'll just edit into that part, which this will let me access the variable table of just that part, not the assembly, because this is where all these variables are in place. So all I have to do is come into this hole, right click, say add suppression variable, and then when I come into the variable table, you'll see I have hole 3 suppress. All I have to do to change that. It'll either be 0 or 1. If I change that to 1, it'll suppress that variable or that feature. That way it doesn't show up. So now we can go back into the overall assembly and we'll look at peer variables. So what the peer variable tool allows you to do is come in here and select the variables for a part that is inside of the assembly. So you don't have to edit into that part in order to get to the variables. Now what we're going to do, we have the number of counterbore holes in this collar part. We want to copy that link, and you'll notice without getting out of this command, I can go into the variables for that plate. And we'll say we want let's find it in here. And you'll see this is where renaming variables comes in handy, because there's a lot in here and you don't want to have to search through what Solid Edge named them. You want to use your own meaningful names. So the thread total, go ahead, we'll paste that link, and then we'll shrink this down. And now we want to drive this with Excel. That way, you don't have to know how this was created in order to make changes, and we can also create a different configuration. So if I come into my Excel sheet, you'll notice I set it up with the part and the different variables. So let's say we want to link the length of the part to the length of the base. So we'll come in here, we'll paste the link, and we want to do the same thing with the number of holes. So we'll come in here, we'll copy it, go back into Solid Edge, and we'll come back to the collar, come back to the total number of holes, and we'll paste the link. And you'll notice it doesn't matter where you click in the variable, you can still paste the link and it'll paste it in there. So now that I have those linked to Excel, if I go ahead and close out of the variable table, bring up my Excel document, we'll move it over. So now, without even going really into Solid Edge, someone could open up this Excel document and change, let's say we need to change this part, we need the length to be 600, which we set it up so that length and height are the same, so that'll also drive the height. You'll see it updated automatically. And we also want the hole count to change, and we'll say maybe we want that to be 8. So we'll go ahead and we'll hit enter. And we made these changes in the Excel document, and now we come into the part, and it might not automatically update, so you just come in here under Tools, and you hit Update All Links, and that will go in and automatically force, well, not automatically, but it'll force an update of the part. You can also go in and hit Alt U on your keyboard, and that will force the update. So that'll force it to update all the links. So that is how you can link Excel and your assembly or your part document together. And one thing to keep in mind when you do that, then if you send this the assembly or the part document to someone, you should probably include the Excel document. That way it keeps that link, and you can still drive it from the Excel document. So the last thing we want to look at today is expose variable. So you've gone in here, and let me just edit into this part. We'll open that. Go ahead and save the changes. And we'll open that part and come into the variable table for that part. So once you've created these variables, maybe you want them to show up in the draft file. So it could either be one of these, or it could be a custom variable that you created that isn't tied to a dimension. So we can come in here to, let's say, the thread total. So this is the number of small holes around there. And we want to put that on we want to call that out on our drawing. So what we have to do is come in here and expose that variable so that we can get to it. And you notice we can choose the exposed name. So once that's exposed, we'll go ahead and close out of the variable table. We'll save it, and we'll just go ahead and create a drawing. Go ahead and we'll just pick a few views on here. We'll place those. And now we want to use a call out to call out this variable that we've created. So in order to get to that, we come into the property text, and we do indexed reference for where to pull the variable from, and you'll see now this under properties thread total shows up. So I can grab thread total and pull that into a draft in the call out, and we'll just say thread total equals 8. So we'll say OK, we'll increase the size on that, and we'll go ahead and we'll save this. And This way, once you change something in here, or even in your part, whatever you change that variable to will update here. So if I'm not necessarily using Excel, if I come in here and I change something in here, it'll update and show it on the draft. All right, that's all we have for today. I'd like to thank you for attending and giving me your little bit of your lunch break. Here's my contact information. Once again, if you have any questions, feel free to send us an email or give us a call, and we'll go ahead and we'll answer those for you. All of our lunch bites, we have replays of them up on our YouTube channel, and you can get to them through our website. And down here in the corner, if you have a smartphone with one of the apps to read these, you can just go ahead and scan that barcode thing in, and it'll link you right to the replays. Once again, if you have any questions, feel free to contact us. Have a nice day.